Oh, hi there. What's that you say? What's this? This is a newspaper. All right, today's talk is a little bit different. Today I'm not pulling from any of the books that I normally pull from. I'm going to pull something from a book that I read a long time ago when I was pursuing my first career. So today's video is going to be particularly useful for people who either have a difficult time communicating with clients or customers, or maybe just kind of communicating in general. It's specific to if you're in a real niche kind of career where the gap between you and your clients or customers is pretty broad and that you don't have a lot in common. That's what we're getting into. So, in my first career interest, the chances of having anything in common with clients was really narrow. It was very minute. Some of the advice that I was given was to read a national paper and a local paper every day. The main idea is just having some kind of a pulse on current events can be helpful, and just having conversations with people because you're probably not always going to be able to talk about just whatever it is that you're doing, regardless of what it is. You need something to fill in the gaps. Sometimes just showing interest in people can go a long way for a lot of different reasons. Some professions, even if you're mostly going to be talking about whatever it is you're doing, you may have gaps where maybe you're letting some kind of process run and you're both just kind of sitting there, or you're waiting for something to happen. And it can be helpful just to have something to talk about. And I know in a lot of the things that I've done for a living, that could be really challenging because of a lot of things that I've done, they've been real niche things where a lot of the things that I might like to talk about would not be of interest to the client or the customer. So having some idea of current events can just help to ease this out. Anyone can talk about the weather, but the weather gets pretty banal pretty fast, and there's only so much you can do with it. So some idea of current events is one place to start. Another thing you can look at if current events aren't a good idea, or it seems like there's always something to talk about with current events, but just in case, sometimes identifying something that the client or customer is interested in and talking about that can take you a long ways. Now, I'm not talking about kissing up. We're just talking about getting to know people. And it really can be important to be able to just have conversations with people. Sometimes you need a little bit of a connection. Now, if you work in some kind of customer service, maybe a call center, you may not have the opportunity to do that with customers or clients most of the time, but you probably report to some kind of a supervisor, you've got coworkers. Being able to fill in these gaps is only going to help you. There is a certain type of personality that really doesn't care about relating to other people, but that's not really going to help you do anything. So developing a little bit of, I guess we could call them social skills, is only going to help. Now, one thing I'm going to be really specific about in relation, especially to the current events thing, is don't get political. You don't want to assume that your client or customer shares your values or your views. They might not. Even if they do, they may not want to talk about it. I've had a lot of clients who had different views than me, and that's fine. I would just kind of let them talk whatever they would want to talk about. I would ask questions. I didn't express my own views on things. There was no point to disagreeing with them. Even if you have a client that agrees with you, there have been a couple times where, just through the course of getting to know someone over time, I've identified that a client and I are on the same page about things. I can think of one guy in particular who just, even though we agreed, he didn't want to talk about current events and politics. He just didn't. So that's fine. We talked about other things. If current events aren't safe, people like to talk about themselves. So find out what they're interested in without getting, sometimes you don't want to get personal, but people like to talk about their families, they like to talk about their pets. If you ask questions about their kids or their pets, one, don't be creepy. So you got to make sure that's appropriate. Two, don't ask the name of their cat if you're not going to remember the name of the cat. You have a better chance of remembering a story about the cat or the kid or whatever than you do the name. So if you're not going to remember the name, don't ask. Just keep it broad. You don't have to get real specific with this stuff. In fact, if you get real specific, it might get creepy. So just stay kind of general, but show some interest. Obviously, anytime you can identify a subject that you have a mutual interest in, that's the best because that's going to make it really easy to talk about. But keep in mind, sometimes customers and clients, they're not always going to be that concerned about what you think about things. They just want to talk about what they're interested in. Now, the last thing I'm going to close with is if you are an employee, You have a responsibility to your employer to take care of your clients and customers. So your views don't matter. We live in an age where everyone thinks their views are really important, but you have a responsibility to your employer. If your employer has a customer or a client and you know that their views are different than yours, you keep it to yourself. Unless the only thing I can think of where that would deviate from that is if you know that something the client is doing deviates from the principles of the business you work for, then you bring that up with your employer and you let them deal with it. That's not for you to do. If you confront clients and customers off things that are like personal to you, that's just bad business. And you may find yourself looking for a new job. If you're so passionate about something that you can't not talk about it, and it's something that's going to be controversial and cause conflict with people, then the only way that's going to work is if you pursue a career that's specific to that, and that's what everybody expects. But if you're working in an office or working in anything where you may be customer facing and you've got views that might not align with theirs, most of the time there's no reason to bring that up. You're not going to change anybody's mind, most likely, and you're probably just going to hurt your career chances. And my final note, if you're keeping a pulse on current events for this purpose, it can be a good strategy. A lot of current events are depressing and negative and so on and so forth. So don't do it to the point to where you start to get depressed and down. Just keep kind of an idea of what's going on so that if someone brings something up, so you can just engage in a little bit of conversation if that's necessary and helpful. All right. I'm not going to tell you to go read a newspaper, but go read a book.